So, funny story. I originally had a disclaimer here about how this video was going to be mostly produced prior to the big Switch presentation, and how some stuff discussed here could have been out of date depending on what Smash news they dropped. Then, two things happened. First, I came down with a real nasty case of the flu that forced me to delay this episode by a week. Then, the Switch presentation came and went, and didn't say a word about Smash. So now we're a week later than planned and with no Smash reveals to throw everything out of whack. All's well that ends well. Also, I want to mention my Patreon real fast. I'm in a real rough situation, and so anything you could do to help would be a godsend, even if it's just spreading word. So with that taken care of, on to the main event. Every franchise that has content in Smash has a story to tell, but I think few are as interesting and as misunderstood as the one Sakurai himself had a hand in creating. And I'm not speaking metaphorically. During his time with HAL Laboratory, he had a direct hand in the creation of the series' debut and Kirby himself. Though Sakurai eventually left HAL to pursue other interests, the time he spent turning the pink puffball into a gaming icon has carried over into his other projects, Smash included. The series' mechanics and style have been Kirby inspired from the beginning, and the Subspace Emissary, at times, feels like an extension of Kirby Superstar's style. Of course, whether that's a good or a bad thing depends on your personal tastes. And therein lies the controversy. Whenever a big new reveal happens and leaves some part of the fandom disappointed, which is pretty much every time, you get people who accuse Sakurai of letting personal bias get in the way of design. And since the Kirby series is one of his creations, it's easy to make into a scapegoat. Back in the day, I saw so many people claim he was giving new Kirby content a free pass in Smash, saying he didn't care about other series. I even saw people bashing Meta Knight and King Dedede for quote-quote stealing slots from quote-quote more deserving characters. Yeah, Kirby back then was like Kid Icarus now. Alright, listen. I've been there. I've been salty. I've been frustrated over newcomer choices I didn't like. But knee-jerk accusations don't help any of us as a community, especially when a closer look tells us it's not so simple. Think about it. You're in charge of this absolutely massive crossover of Nintendo franchises. The list of tasks your team has to get done every day goes down so far you'd wear out your mouse or touchpad scrolling through it all. You'd want to look for ways to lighten the load, right? Make things go a little smoother so you can accomplish more in other parts of the project? That's why I think we get more secondary content from series Sakurai has worked on than expected. Stages, summons, trophies, etc. He's already familiar with the subject matter, and since he had a hand in creating it, the licensing is a snap. It's probably also why Sakurai stuck to content from older Kirby games for the 3DS and Wii U versions of Smash 4. Sure, it might feel at first that it must have been biased, and it might feel comforting and kind of gratifying to tell ourselves that, but the facts paint a different picture. He was just being pragmatic, saving time so we could cram as much content in as possible. And nothing says we couldn't see other content from other franchises at other points if things broke the right way, even from modern Kirby games. Which is our roundabout way of getting to today's challenger, who's made a lot of strides lately as a member of the new guard, so to speak. Bandana Dee, aka Bandana Waddle Dee, sometimes just Waddle Dee if he's the only one of them present, is King Dedede's right-hand man and a sort of captain of the Royal Guard. He also happens to be good friends with Kirby, which sounds like a conflict of interest, but apparently it works. Whenever some great evil force shows up to threaten Dreamland yet again, Bandana Dee is always right there nowadays to lend Kirby a hand in some way, shape, or form. Despite all the talk of him being just a Waddle Dee, Bandana Dee has his own distinct appearance and personality that makes him an individual and not just a generic member of the species. It'd be like saying Captain Toad is just a toad, or saying Little Mac is just a boxer, or saying Corrin is just another anime swordsman. Bandana Dee actually got his first role in a bit part in 1996's Kirby Superstar, where he was the first opponent you faced in the minigame Megaton Punch. From there, he sat around for several years. The Waddle Dee in Kirby 64 might have been him, but we don't know. But then when Kirby Superstar got remade in 2008, he got a major role in the new mode Revenge of the King, where he had spoken dialogue throughout its entire final level and was the only spectator for Dedede's grudge match with Kirby. He even got to take over the role of the unusually durable Waddle Dee enemy in the boss rush mode. But his big break would come 3 years later in Kirby's Return to Dreamland, where he stood alongside Kirby, Meta Knight, and King Dedede as a fully playable character. And he's taken that chance and run with it so far, appearing in some form in every new Kirby game since. That's something not even Meta Knight can say. Bandana Dee's really grown to be treated like part of the main cast. He's had the aforementioned parts in the new games, in-game unlockables depicting his likeness, and even appearing alongside the big three on promotional materials for Kirby's 20th anniversary and beyond. All in all, it's safe to say that Bandana Dee has become this franchise's main character number 4. But we should probably talk about his weapon of choice too. He's a master spear fighter and signature user of the spear ability. As you know, we don't have anyone in Smash yet who wields a spear or lance. It doesn't mean we need a spear user, but what it does mean is that a character who specializes in them has a unique niche wide open for the taking, making Bandana Dee pretty compelling just because of his weapon. That, plus being an interesting new face in a long-running franchise, has led to some pretty substantial fan support. At least enough to net him a spot in the fan-made Super Smash Flash 2. We'll be referencing his moveset from that game a few times. I like some of what they did with his character concept there, although there's some other stuff I think could be done better. Overall, Bandana Dee may not have the incredible powers at his command like many Smashers have, but his bravery and desire to prove himself may yet be enough to give him his chance. And if it was enough, what would Bandana Dee be like in Smash? So, first of all, his look isn't hard at all to get right. He's had one simple, consistent design ever since he was playable. Same shape, same slightly redder color than most Waddle Dees, though it can vary depending on lighting and art style. Same blue bandana, same spear with a ribbon tied to it, same lovable underdog overall. That said, I think they could add a little detail to it, like how they gave Rosalina's gown a star pattern or other miscellaneous aesthetic upgrades. Super Smash Flash 2 did it by sticking Dedede's emblem on the front of the bandana, which is something I could actually see the Smash 4 devs doing for real. We also have a few options for alternate colors already. In Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, any extra players who jump in during the main campaign play as Bandana Dee, and players 3 and 4 control yellow and green doppelgangers of him. There's 2 alts right there. Further ones could come from the blue Waddle Dee palette in Nightmare in Dreamland, the purple palette in Superstar and its remake, and the obligatory Dreamland grayscale alt following Kirby and Dedede. Every alt would have its own bandana color as well. Maybe a few would even have a different symbol on the front. As for his animations, we want them to convey Bandana Dee's personality, which takes some looking into his supplemental material. He comes off as the rookie trying to prove his worth, with his figurine description in Rainbow Curse saying he's seeking his fair share of the spotlight to prove he can stand alongside the rest of the main cast. His animations could be set up to carry that feeling, having him try his hardest to look cool and be someone the crowd pulls for. He may not always succeed, you know how these tropes work, but he'd be endearing because of how hard he tried to prove his worth. Kinda like Luigi. On from aesthetics to hard numbers and details, and here's where things get a little trickier to figure out. Bandana Dee's playstyle would reflect both his weapon of choice and his species. Wielding a spear gives a tendency toward poking at opponents from a safe distance and using your greater range to win exchanges in neutral. Since the majority of the spear ability's attacks are long-range stabs, it makes sense. But he could also have other tools to fall back on that make him fairly well-rounded. You see, as weak as most Waddle Dees are, they're highly adaptable and capable of surviving in many environments and performing many roles. Giving Bandana Dee some versatility would be a neat way to allude to that, though outboxing opponents with his range would still be his go-to strategy. That well-roundedness would also carry over into Bandana Dee's stats. Well, in regards to Kirby characters anyway. He's small and light, like Kirby and Meta Knight. Waddle Dees are pretty similarly built after all. I did make him slightly heavier than they are though. Waddle Dees can't inflate themselves and float the way Kirby and Meta Knight species can, so they probably have a little more weight on them. And as far as balancing goes, it also helped him live slightly longer. His mobility overall would be subpar, but not bad by any means, and he could more than make up for it with his range. I made his grounded mobility slightly slower than Kirby's despite their similar builds, since he carries a weapon around. I had to feel more for the air and fall speeds, and I ultimately decided to put them roughly between Kirby and Meta Knight. Sometimes when you can't find something precise to base your concept on, you have to use your instincts. Just as long as you don't over-rely on them. He also wouldn't have multiple jumps, unlike the rest of the Kirby cast in Smash. The animation in Return to Dreamland makes it seem an awful lot like they only gave it to him because everyone else had it and the level design was built around it. Unlike our last few challengers, Bandana Dee doesn't have a gimmick that fits, but he also doesn't need a gimmick. No need to shoehorn one in where it doesn't belong, and he can hold his own just fine without one. But now, on to the main event. How do we build a moveset around someone who wields a spear? Bandana Dee's moveset in Return to Dreamland is a carbon copy of the one Kirby has with the spear ability, and so it's the perfect place to start. His jab combo would start with upward and downward swings and then transition into the multi-spear attack as a rapid jab. The first two hits would have him grip the spear at the end with one stubby hand thing and grip halfway up the spear with the other, for shorter range but more precise swings. Then you could add the standard spear thrust as his forward tilt, and for his up smash, take the skyward thrust and turn it into a 3-hit series of stabs, aimed up and at a slight forward angle, then up and slightly back, then straight up. Then we could throw in a handful of moves not directly based on the spear ability, but inspired by it. Bandana Dee's down smash could have him perform a handstand and spin the spear around below him, dealing multiple hits to both sides. And his forward throw could have him whack his opponent away with the blunt side of the spearhead. Or maybe impale them with it and then fling the spear away like a javelin, but that'd be kinda graphic. And then there's some ideas the Super Smash Flash 2 team came up with that I really like. A multi-hit spear spin as his neutral air, a horizontal spear spin below him for his dare, would help him land and intercept recoveries, but unlike in Super Smash Flash 2, it wouldn't spike because a spike hitbox that wide that lasts that long is not okay. And for his back air, a simple turnaround kick for variety. And also, this taunt, which is just too perfect to pass up. So the moveset so far has its highlights, but it's also kinda bland. Makes you question if Bandana Dee has enough to work with from just a spear. So, what if we pulled from some other stuff the Dee family can do? What if his spear was a high-tech one like the hammer DDD uses in Smash, and could morph into a parasol like the ones used by Parasol Waddle Dees? Or have a magic gem at its core that could shoot energy beams similar to the ones Waddle Dees can create? I've messed around with the idea for a couple years now. And go figure, the Super Smash Flash 2 devs had the same idea, so now I sound like a total rip-off artist. Guess great minds think alike? The spear's parasol function, much like the parasol ability, would give Bandana Dee a few attacks that are on the weaker side but have utility purposes. His up tilt could have him stick the spear up as the umbrella popped out of it, mimicking the default position Kirby holds the parasol in when he has the ability. Not very strong, but it'd have a lingering hitbox to cover above him just like you'd expect. Then his up air would be similar, except since he's airborne, the parasol would slow his descent while it was out, just like how it does when Kirby has it. And they could bring in the circus throw to use as Bandana Dee's up throw, with the ability to also damage any other opponents who got too close. Then the beam ability would be worked in some less conventional ways. One way to implement it would be to base Bandana Dee's forward air on the long-range cycle beam, just with a little less range since, balance. Then his forward smash could be a large, close-range burst resembling the wave beam, but without it moving or being a projectile, because, balance. And then his back throw could be based on the capture beam command throw. All that's left is to mix in a few other ideas. They could give Bandana Dee the same low crouch as Kirby, the same low kick for his down tilt, but with knockback that pops enemies up instead of making them trip, and maybe even a down throw where he shoves his opponent onto the ground and gives him a quick punch to the gut. But what's a moveset without something a little more special? Let's round out the rest of Bandana Dee's moveset, shall we? First off, for his neutral special, the very predictable spear throw. Press B to fling Bandana Dee's spear like a javelin to strike anyone in its path. It combined elements of both Return to Dreamland and Triple Deluxe versions of this attack, allowing you to hold for a bit to throw a 3-spear spread shot on release, as well as be able to move a little while you're holding it. I realize it's actually performed with a forward input in the Kirby games, but overall, this just kinda makes most sense at neutral here. If you're wondering, there's also precedent. Kirby's hammer flip has always been done with an up input, not a side one. This isn't any different. Spear throw would be a simplistic, no-frills projectile that tack on some damage in neutral and open up opponents. The upward arc would also let you use it to hit anyone trying to come at you from the air, as yet another anti-air option. So what about his side special? This one was a little tricky, but I settled on the classic beam whip, channeling the spear's center gem to swing an energy beam in a forward arc. Sure, at first glance it looked like the same dinky little attack it is in the Kirby games, but its true purpose would lie in its utility. The whip would deal multiple hits as it swung that'd trap opponents in it, and the sparks that make up the whip would hang at their maximum range for a little afterward and stay in place as hitboxes. These hitboxes would be able to clank with and nullify weaker projectiles while they're active. Beam Whip would be an option to use in mid-range for a safe-ish poke that also protect you from all but the strongest projectile attacks. That said, the animation would last a while, so don't throw it out at a whim unless you're willing to commit. Use it wisely, and you have a useful tool against projectile zoning to make Bandana Dee that much better at handling any threat. For his up special, pretty obvious this one, Spear Copter. Hold the B button to charge, then release to have Bandana Dee spin his spear like a propeller to fly upward to safety. The longer you held B, the further you'd go before petering out and going into freefall. I realize the source material has you keep spinning all the way until you land, but I think we're best off avoiding the busted ass juggles it's capable of in the current Super Smash Flash 2 beta. The move would always charge part of the way automatically, would reach its full charge pretty fast, about a second, and it'd move at below average speed and deal multiple hits on the way up. Its overall distance would be merely okay on a full charge, and combined with the lack of multiple jumps, it'd make Bandana Dee's offstage game less prominent than those of the other Kirby characters. And for the down special, we're going to pull from another secondary weapon, with Parasol Dive. Bandana Dee would activate the umbrella on his spear and fling it at a downward angle to carry him to the ground. This move would deal multiple hits to anyone caught by the parasol, and it'd also send out rotating stars to either side as he descended that knock opponents outward. Like how Beam Whip gives him a way to deal with projectiles, this would be Bandana Dee's answer to disjointed juggle attempts, giving him a way down once he sees an opening. You might have to worry about getting your landing trapped still, but it's something. I could potentially see it also having a grounded version similar to Falcon Kick, based on the move Parasol Drill. I can see the argument for it, but on the other hand, it might be better to not let him have that long distance punish option, and instead have him hop slightly and then drop down immediately to get the landing hitbox. Which do you think fits the concept better? All we have left now is the final smash, and what better move to use for it than the one that gave Bandana Dee his debut, Megaton Punch. A press of the B button would bring down two big cinder blocks where Bandana Dee stood. If anyone got hit by him, they'd get popped up and land prone on top of the blocks. From there, it goes straight into the minigame, requiring 3 precise button presses to power up. One right as a meter fills, then right when 2 targeting reticles cross over each other, then finally when a swinging pendulum passes right over an outline. With all 3 inputs complete, Bandana Dee would leap up and split the cinder blocks with an earth-shaking punch and send anyone stuck on him flying. The more precise your inputs were, the more damage and knockback the punch would deal. Nail all 3 perfectly without getting distracted by the chaos going on around you, and it's a one-hit kill. This is what Bandana Dee could bring to Smash. A rising star who yearns to stand alongside his idols as their equal, he uses his mastery of the spear to the fullest to maintain the upper hand with its long range, and then falls back in a surprisingly diverse move pool if he needs to. He may not have overwhelming power or long flashy combos, but through hard work and determination, he can claim victory over anyone. Bandana Dee's strengths lie in his strong footsies and anti-air abilities, and in walling out opponents who have linear and predictable neutral games. But his low survivability, middling damage output, and straight-line hitboxes that give him issues dealing with enemy disjoints at swinging arcs all serve to keep him in check and make him a balanced character. I want to give real quick special thanks to Alpharad, who allowed me to use his Super Smash Flash 2 footage as visual aid for their take on Bandana Dee. He makes a variety of content, including highlight videos, gameplay montages, and oh, who am I kidding? If you follow Smash 4, you already know who he is. Thanks as well to everyone who supported me through Patreon so far. I couldn't keep doing this without you guys. Our next challenger might feel kinda shafted by their lack of invites so far. In fact, there's someone who I thought was gonna make it into the base version of Smash 4, and I was surprised when they didn't. This is where I was gonna make another disclaimer regarding potential news from the Switch presentation, but since they're waiting a little longer to make any Smash announcements, we're gonna stick with our original plan and our next planned challenger. Unless something else weird happens. Who knows, right? So, see you next time.